Well, it probably helps that I'm not a very good Christian. I, I think a lot of Christians tend to identify with the idea that God loves them, and I agree with that. It's something I believe. But with my life, I identify with some of the darker aspects of Christianity too, like the idea that I'm born dark and sinful. I don't force that belief on other people necessarily, but it makes sense to me. And the idea that a price has to be paid in blood. There's a verse that talks about the days being evil. And so the idea that, in the struggle for good and evil, if good does nothing, then evil is the default, both within our own spirit and then within the world. And so I think that connects to horror pretty well. In Dead Song, I guess the first statement is that fiction is meant to show the full range of human existence, and the LGBT community is a part of that. But then also, the more I've thought about it, like a gay character is sort of a natural survivor. Characters from that particular community have to survive, a struggle with identity that can be presented as a crisis. They also, their world can be turned completely upside down as they begin to express that identity to different people. And so it very naturally comes into an apocalyptic story, I think. Well, it started as sort of a weird little short story, and then I decided to expand it into a novel. So I was writing the novel, and I got about halfway through the first night in the novel and started to realize this is not going to finish in a novel. And so I said, okay, well, it's probably a trilogy. And then I went a couple more chapters, and then I figured out I'm going to finish this and not be 1/3 done. So I sat down and I outlined out, if I were to tell the entire mythology as it was presented in the short story, what would I need? And it came out to 12 books. And so it wasn't an arbitrary number. It actually, that's how much it's going to take to tell the story. And so I sort of threw down the gauntlet right from the beginning that I'm going to tell this whole story, and this is how many books it's going to take to do it. The characters in the story collect music, and so the evolution of music is key to what they do and how they're experiencing the end of the world. And as I was writing it and sort of describing music with words, it felt a little flat and silent. And so I thought, if I'm really going to do this, I need to record music. And the mashups were pretty well described in the short story. But the fact that I lacked musical talent probably was going to be an obstacle. So I sort of said, well, let's see if I can do it anyway. And I kind of pulled together some people more talented than me, and then sort of pushed myself to make it happen anyway. And so we recorded the songs, and we're going to keep doing it. I did outline all 12. Like, I came up with the number 12 because that's how much it was going to take to tell the story. Now, the big difference is sort of in figuring out where a novel is going to stop. So if I know what's going to occur from book to book, sometimes I have to decide, okay, do I stop before this major event or just after it? And so some of that is sort of the decision in terms of where a book stops and where the next one begins. And of course, some of the story evolves as I go along, but at this moment, I know what's going to happen in book 12, how this series is going to play out. So it's not arbitrary. I know when I'm introducing characters, and I know when I'm introducing story. The story is about the characters, so they are in the forefront. I've always thought that a really good zombie story the zombies should be reflecting what the characters are doing. So whatever they're struggling with, whatever they're fighting with in their action, the zombie action in the story, which is there, needs to reflect that. So it is a part of the storytelling, almost like their internal struggle sort of brought out among the dead monsters in the middle of the apocalypse. I'll do you one better. Sometimes I have stationary zombies. What I try to do with them is have them be as frightening as they need to be for a particular scene. Most of my stories kind of fall in the Romero universe, follow those rules, so more towards what you'd consider the lumbering dead. But some of that's in how it's reflected. So, a zombie can seem fast if it's close and it's closing in. So some of the description sort of does that. But I found in some cases with this particular story, the zombies will stop and stare at different times, and that sometimes can be even scarier than the motion itself. The mashups in the original short story, I kind of started looking at, what wouldn't naturally make sense. And so I kind of looked at, what could happen. Also, I took it from the standpoint of, okay, here's different groups of survivors that come together. What would their different musical tastes be, and how would those come together when they're forced to stay together? So a lot of the mashups came together from thinking about what would the survivors become. I think we are going to do all of them at some point. If we do 5 per novel, that would come out to 60 songs. So it's going to get a little creative towards the end. And there's a couple new mashups that we're talking about also. Some of it comes down to the music, the idea that they would go by different names when they're performing. The different characters have different reasons. One gives his reason as being that he's trying to protect his real name, so he's having to do bad things in order to survive. And he doesn't want any of that stuff to stick to him when he tries to go back to real life one day, hopefully. But then also, one of the themes in the story is that identity is sort of 2 facets. One is what we choose to show to people, and the other is what we choose to hide from people. And both of those things come together to make our identity. And so in a way, the ones that reveal their real names and the ones that withhold them are part of who they are in the story. Yes, one of the big mysteries is sort of this underlying magic behind the zombies, sort of akin to voodoo, and that's going to come out in some of the later novels. It's being hinted at as we go along, and then slowly that mystery is going to be unfolded and shown for what it really is. Mud music is, as we're talking about all these mashups that they found, it's sort of this mystical style of music up in Appalachia that has a much more sinister mystery behind it. And the main character kind of becomes obsessed with it in the short story, and it eventually becomes his undoing. And we will get to see in the novels what really happened. All this stuff that the people who are telling the story in the short story don't know about. The rest of his story will be told as well. So that's where the mud music is. It's where the mystery becomes even darker towards the end. Appreciate your time. The series is called The Dead Song Legend. Book 1, January from Milwaukee to Muscle Shoals, is out now. The soundtrack is called The Sound May Suffer, and the first one is Book 1, January, Songs from the Dead Song Legend, Book 1. The soundtrack is available on iTunes and CD Baby and Spotify and now on Amazon. And the book is available on Amazon both as ebook and as a paperback. So I appreciate your support, and feel free to buy both if you'd like.